So this video is for people who are trying to decide if they've been in no contact too long, and if they just need to decide to accept the inevitable, because it probably feels inevitable at this point if you're watching this video. So you just accept that it's over and move on. So there are certain situations that really make you ask this question to yourself more than others. One of those things is if you've kind of gone past certain time frames. Like when you start no contact, it's really hard, it's difficult. So nobody goes into no contact thinking, or very few people go into no contact thinking, I'm going to be able to stay in no contact forever. There's usually a time frame. Once you blow past those time frames, you're left with three options. Do I reach out to them and give it one more try? This is when a lot of people say, okay, I'm just going to get my own closure. I know it's going to sabotage no contact. It'll probably mean they won't come back, but I just need to know for me. You have the option 2, which is pretty obvious, stay in no contact. Or 3, a lot of people start to wonder, maybe I should just accept that this isn't going to happen and just move on. Well, take a deep breath and think, if it's working, if you feel like you're getting stronger, this is the key question to ask. While you've been in no contact, have you been hyper fixated on them? Are you starting to feel stronger? If you're doing no contact, and I don't want to say the right way, but if you're doing it the most effective way, then you should be getting stronger as you're doing it. So one of the first things you want to ask yourself is, how are you doing? Kind of take your own emotional pulse. Take a deep breath. Are you doing this because your mind is trying to rationalize it? Because that's usually the number one thing that makes people want to break no contact. They'll tell themselves, I don't think there's a chance. I need to get closure. So for that closure, I'm going to write them a 17-page letter, stained with my own teardrops and with my left ear cut off and enclosed as a gift. Whatever it is, you're just going to kind of justify to yourself because, look, no contact is painful. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of fear. And when you're going through it, once you hit a certain marker, you almost feel like you owe it to yourself. You've earned something. You've done something difficult. So you want to reward yourself. And sometimes you do this little mental gymnastic game until you end up with a justification. Hey, it's okay. I'm reaching out to them because I've accepted that it's over. And I want to walk away knowing that I shared my heart. I either told them that apology that I didn't tell them before, or I want to stick up for myself and point out something that they did to me that was really wrong. Or I just want to let them know that they're losing the person that they shouldn't have lost and that they'll regret it one day. So sometimes those are very real things that you want to tell them. Tell them if you mean it, but stop and take a deep breath and ask yourself if this is justification to reach out. Are you really sending them that apology because that's the final word you want them to have from you? Or are you really reaching out to them to give them that message because that's what you need for quote unquote closure? Or are you doing it with that deep hope that when they read or get the message that you're sending out to them, that will bring them back to you? Because your mind will play games. You'll convince yourself you're doing it for one reason, but deep down you know you're actually hoping for this result that a lot of times is not going to happen. Breaking no contact and giving them that reach out, you really have to know if it's for you, for that real sense of closure, or if it's just a mind game you're playing with yourself. Because imagine that you play it out. Imagine that you send them that last message because you've been in no contact for 30, 45, or 60 days, and you just think it's not going to work. So this is the best I'll be able to do. Just leave my heart, leave my message with them. Okay, so play it out in your mind. Now imagine you sent it to them and you got no response. Maybe you get a rude response. What if it gets worse? Imagine that. If you're not okay, if you don't feel a sense of strength, if you don't feel a sense of acceptance when you imagine the worst case scenario happening, if you know that instinctively, as soon as you get that negative response, now you're going to start hyper analyzing, why did I send that message in the first place? Why did I have to do that? I've gone 30 days, I've gone 45, maybe I've gone 60 or 90 days in no contact. You just tore down all those days. You just undid all the work that you've done, all the effort and all that sacrifice that it took to do no contact. Remember, you're tearing all that down. No, maybe that's good. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes you don't want to rebuild. Your heart does, but maybe in the long run, you've realized that you were hoping for something that's not best for you and wasn't going to work out anyway. In which case, tear it down, reach out. Sometimes there is value in speaking the truth, no matter how the other person responds to the truth. If you know it's real, if you know it's something that you want to express to somebody, there is value in just saying it because you know it was said. But if you're saying it hoping that it'll change the heart and the mind of the person you're trying to win back, it's not usually going to work. So make sure that whatever you're justifying to yourself is true, because we can lie to ourselves better than we can lie to anybody. Another situation is if your ex has already started dating somebody. That's a really painful one. And everybody kind of has their own line. You might have had one line before the breakup happened. And what I mean by that is you might have always said, look, if we ever break up, and the person I'm with sleeps with somebody or starts dating somebody else, then I'm finished. Most people say that, but then the breakup really kind of triggers some anxiety, some desperation, and some pain, a lot of times to a level that we didn't expect, sometimes to a level that we've never felt before. Some of you watching this are right now bearing the unbearable. You might be in more pain than you know how to put into words. I remember when I was going through it, I used to almost kind of step out of my own body and think, I didn't know it was capable to process and to feel pain to this level. And I don't feel like I'm doing it. I feel like I'm surviving it, but I don't feel like I'm strong enough to survive it. Like every breath hurts. I don't know where to get the strength to get up off the couch. So it feels like sometimes it feels like you're kind of bearing the unbearable. And a lot of times that level of pain happens because they're with somebody else. A breakup's painful enough. A breakup that involves seeing your ex with somebody else, it does elevate that pain. And sometimes it can elevate the pain so much, the pain becomes evidence that it's hopeless. That when the pain's really intense, it convinces you automatically of three different things. If the pain's really kind of overwhelming and unbearable, it convinces you that they're irreplaceable. We equate pain to value. If it hurts me this much to lose them, I must love them even more than I realize. We don't stop and realize that sometimes that pain, part of it comes from fear of loss, regret. Our imagination runs wild. We imagine them living happily ever after with the dream life that we should have had. We can imagine all the years unfolding and all the regret and all the hurt and all the envy and jealousy and sense of loss of what we should have had. We kind of live all the future out in an instant over and over and over again, which can be excruciatingly painful. And that pain will convince us that they're irreplaceable, that we broke it, and that they're never coming back. That's what fear does. So sometimes in this state, people will ask me this, and they don't mean it. But they'll say something like, this is over. I've cried for the last 4 days. I know they're not coming back. And it's like your sense of being overwhelmed translates into evidence that you wouldn't be this overwhelmed if there was hope. So sometimes when you're in overwhelming pain, that pain, it's almost like our mind has to attach meaning to it. And part of the meaning we'll attach to that pain is hopelessness. Now that hopelessness isn't really trustworthy, but the feeling is so strong that the feelings being real convince you that the feelings are true. And if your feelings are this overwhelming and it feels this unbearable, that's an indication to you that it really is hopeless, even though it's not really any kind of truth at all. That's not real evidence that they're not coming back. Just because you feel a level of desperation that lines up with them never coming back doesn't mean they aren't coming back. Take a deep breath. If you're asking yourself this question out of hopelessness, have hope. I promise you, if you're watching this video and it feels like, you're in a situation that's just special, it's special in a sense that you just know, and I hear this all the time. I know it in my gut. You don't know my ex, but I know it in my heart. They're really not ever coming back. I have literally seen thousands of couples get back together when somebody feels that. So remember, accept how you feel, but don't trust what it tells you. So it's okay. I'm not trying to tell you not to feel that way. I can't tell you not to feel that way. I've been there. I know what that feels like. But I can tell you that feeling isn't nearly as trustworthy as it seems like. And the pain, along with the thoughts, just kind of double team you, and they'll drain you of all hope and flood you with despair. It's not true, but it'll feel true. If that's the situation you're in, I'd say give yourself permission just to have hope. I'm not sitting here telling you it's 100% guarantee they're coming back, but you can't tell me it's 100% guarantee that they won't. Look, unless you're in some kind of a special situation, like if you're being shipped off to prison, if they just left you for your brother and they had 4 kids and none of them are yours. I mean, look, there's always a situation, but most people watching this video are not in that situation. They just feel like it's hopeless. That's not real evidence that it is. And then the vast majority of people that are asking this question, I would say it boils down to one thing. When you're in no contact, a large period of it, you're going to kind of have a civil war inside of your own heart. I should say inside of your own soul, because in your soul, your heart and your mind are going to be at war with each other. Your heart is usually the one telling you to hold out. The heart's the one that's whispering things to you that'll really kind of drive you crazy. Your heart's telling you 2 things. I need them back, I want them back, and they're not coming back. Because your heart is scared and it just took a beating. But don't trust your heart right now. Your heart has been shaken. Your heart has been traumatized. It's almost like imagine that your heart got kidnapped and then it was taken downstairs into a basement, thrown into a bathtub with a tarp covering it. It's like that's the kind of trauma that your heart's trying to recover from. It's just had its world rocked and it's shaken. So it wants 2 conflicting, and it's flooded with 2 conflicting thoughts. One is that it wants you very badly, it wants you back, and the second thought is you're not coming back because you're traumatized. Your mind, on the other hand, is kind of trying to get control of everything. It's trying to tell you to calm down. It's trying to tell you contradicting things too. Like your mind is saying, okay, I understand factually people have gotten back together. So I'm going to watch videos. I'm going to set up a call with the coach. I'm going to come up with the best plan. I'm going to come up with the best strategy. Your heart will try to break into everything that your heart is flooding you with and try to take control. You'll find yourself taking a deep breath, and then your mind is going to step to the forefront and be the general. We'll come up with a plan, we'll come up with a strategy, and we'll figure out a way to do this. Especially if you're a problem solver. You've solved problems in the past, so you're going to try to take that same mindset here. It might have served you well in college. It might have served you well in your career. It might have served you well in other relationships. But now if you're really rocked, it's still going to impact your mind. So your mind is going to be in hyper analysis mode. One day it's going to think it's going to work. This is happening. Okay, this is step one, no contact. Step two, they're going to reach out. Hopefully they're thinking about me. You've got all the stages of the breakup kind of memorized. At first, when your mind is in control, it's going to feel good. Okay, I have a plan. I have a strategy. I know where we are. I know the phases of the breakup. I know the phases of them coming back. I know all the stages. I've got it memorized. So at first you feel this sense of comfort, this sense of peace. All right, I have a little bit of sense of control. I talked to a relationship coach. I've watched the relationship videos. I know how to win my ex back. Here we go. But again, when that certain time frame passes and when certain things rock you, especially look, if you're hyper vigilant on something, if you're really watching something to that degree, you're going to see good signs that you will normally just kind of discredit and disallow unless it's absolutely provably good. But all the little things you're going to notice, and it's going to make you construct this whole reality of darkness, of despair and dread. So even though you think you're being logical, when you're in that hyper fixated, hyper focused mode, your emotions are going to go along with you. That mind doesn't want to be a fool. So when you don't see enough positive signs, and a lot of times in no contact, in the most powerful stages of no contact, you're not seeing anything. Keep in mind, you only get the signals and signs that they're thinking about you when it's built up internally. The problem is with your mind, you get too hyperfixated and you too quickly lose that sense of control, that sense of confidence. And you can't trust what you're analyzing. Like, this really isn't the experiment that it feels like. In an experiment, you put things in action. You know, you mix certain chemicals, you create certain scenarios, and then you watch it unfold. And you know exactly which parts to be aware of. When you're in no contact, a big portion of it's going to happen under the surface. Like when they reach out to you, it's not like they're going to miss you and then suddenly reach out and call you in the same moment. It takes time to build. And while it's taking time to build, like I've said before, it'll feel like you're staring at rocks in the backyard. And you stare at rocks for 30 days, 45 or 60 days, and nothing's happened. You just feel like a moron who's staring at rocks. You don't really know what's happening under the surface. But there could be a volcano about to break the ground and turn into a mountain. You don't know. It does happen, but it won't feel like it's going to happen. And because you don't get the signs, you don't get the signals to verify and to encourage you, it's really easy to talk yourself out of it working. I mean, I've lived it myself. For me, it was 3.5 months. And when I actually got the message that she wanted to see me again, I had just finished crying, thinking that it was never going to work, that I was never going to hear from her. I have a ton of clients that will send me emails, and you can see it on the topic line. He reached out. She reached out. You were right. I can't believe it. So don't let your agony, don't let your feelings convince you that they're trustworthy. It won't feel like it's going to happen until it happens. But that's kind of what brings you to that question. Should I stay in no contact or should I just move on? Because you're exhausted mentally and emotionally from kind of watching the process and not getting anything back. This is not the kind of experiment where you're going to get a lot of feedback, where you're going to get a lot of signals to tell you, hey, it's working. Once in a while, you might see a slip of the mask. You might see that it's working. You might get those subtle reach outs. Or you might have had these subtle reach outs, but they've gone back and forth and never really pulled you back enough. So you think, it's not that no contact didn't give me any kind of reaction. They reach out to me every month, every 2 months. They reach out. We even talk about getting together, and then it doesn't happen. And that's just left me exhausted. So I don't know if I should stay in no contact or just move on. And that leads me to the most common scenario. Look, if you're asking yourself, the truth is, this is kind of a trick question. Because if somebody were to call me and say, hey, listen, this is the painful story of my breakup, but honestly, I just want to move on. Well, I would tell them to do no contact. No contact is the best way to remind yourself of your own worth, to disconnect from that dark limerence. Because inside, when you're going through a breakup, the cortisol level is shot up. The norepinephrine is shot up. It's elevated. The depression is shot up. Your adrenaline is shot up. But not the good kind of adrenaline that makes you feel alert and anxious and excited. The kind of adrenaline that, like, if you're being hunted in a horror movie. That sense of despair, that sense of overwhelming dread, that fear. So it's adrenaline turned into fear. So you're still kind of under this emotional and hormonal cocktail that's going to really kind of keep you in a level of depression and despair that's not really a reflection of reality at all. But it'll feel like it is. And if you're in that much pain and exhaustion and just being hyper-focused on something that hurts so much, you're asking yourself, should I just move on? Because you think moving on means that there's an end to the pain. Maybe if I accept that this is over, I'll get over it faster than just holding on. But to a large degree, that question's not real. Because what I mean by that is, If you're asking the question, then there's a good chance that maybe you're doing no contact on the outside, but not on the inside. And what I mean by that is maybe you're doing a really good job not reaching out, and you've accepted that you don't need to send them a message, or you need to try not to call them. Maybe you've done a really good job on the outside. Maybe you've kind of learned to live every day knowing that you're not going to send them a text. Maybe you know what it's like to fight off that compulsion, and you've become comfortable with the fact you trust yourself. You know you're not going to reach out to them. You know you're not going to break no contact. So maybe you've mastered no contact on the outside. But internally, in ways that they don't know about, maybe you've been driving by the house, maybe you ask friends, maybe there's a million little clever ways, distinctive ways. Maybe you go for a jog and they don't know it. Maybe you go for a drive using somebody else's car. Maybe you're peeking on their social media. Maybe you've unfollowed and unfriended, but you know that special site that lets you peek in and see what their Instagram looks like. You've just kind of found a way to stay locked in. Again, you're in that mode of just being hyper vigilant and watching the great experiment that is no contact. That'll exhaust you. That's the situation that leads you to this question that's not really a question. If you're doing no contact and you're not sure if you should keep doing it or if you should walk away, I would say just do a stronger version of no contact, because the truth is your intent in no contact doesn't mean as much as it feels like it means to you. What I would tell myself when I was going through it, I'd say, look, maybe it's not going to work. Like I said, I was in no contact for 3.5 months. After 3 months, I told myself, well, maybe I'm lying to myself. Well, maybe I am, but the good news is if I am lying to myself, doing no contact the right way, which means I'm not looking, I'm not peeking, I'm not adjusting my strategy, I'm not monitoring my strategy, I'm not monitoring even the progress of my strategy. Real no contact is not just on the outside, I'm not following, it's on the inside. Of course, I'm still hurting, but I've stopped myself from peeking over into their life. I've stopped myself from monitoring how effective or not effective no contact is. Because the best way to do no contact is to just move forward. Like legitimately, at the beginning, it'll feel like you're pretending. It'll feel like you're faking strength you don't have. That's not really the truth. The truth is you're just choosing to remember who you are at your strongest, at your most confident, at your most secure. You're choosing to remember that version of yourself, and you're acting like that version of yourself. You're behaving like that version of yourself. Does that mean that you're a phony? Does that mean you're a fake? No. It just means that you're controlling your emotion. You're controlling that sense of being overwhelmed and choosing to live and to act out the strongest and actually truest version of yourself in spite of the pain. In other words, if somebody cut me off in traffic, the authentic version of me wants to jump out of the car and rip them out of the window. If I don't do that, does that make me inauthentic? Or does that make me a man that knows how to control my emotions? Even if inside I'm just, ugh. But on the outside, if I just look at the kids in the car and go, it's okay, I'm just going to drive around him. And does that make me a fake? No, that just means that I'm remembering how I act when I'm in control. I'm remembering the strongest and the most wise version of me, and I'm acting out that version instead of giving the emotional control to an urge that I have that I know is just going to hurt me. So it's the same thing. When you're starting in no contact, you're just choosing to act like a person who has control of emotions that inside feel overwhelming. But as you're doing no contact, you're not just proving to your ex that you're strong enough to live without them. You're not just proving to your ex that you have a purpose and that you have a plan to your life that's more foundational to who you are than their feelings towards you at any given time. You're reminding yourself. And if you're asking yourself this question, should I stay in no contact or should I move on? You've probably neglected the part where you're proving to yourself that you're capable of living without them. What I would tell me when this question came up is, well, the good thing is I'm doing the right thing either way. If I'm doing no contact the right way, if I'm really focused on rebuilding my life and reminding myself that I'm going to have an exceptional life, I'm going to have an intriguing life, I'm going to have a life worth living with or without them. I hope I'm living that strength out and showing it on the outside, that it's going to pull them back. It's going to remind them of what they walked away from. But if it doesn't, the good news is hold on to this truth. If your beliefs and your behaviors don't agree, and in the beginning of no contact they won't, you're choosing to act in a way that you don't feel. But if you're consistent with that behavior, your consistent behavior will change your beliefs. So after enough time, you start to realize, hey, I actually am capable of living without them. I actually am going to have a good life that I wish they were a part of, but if they're not, I'm still going to be lucky to be who I am. So it's a trick question. Do I stay in no contact, or do I just accept the breakup is over and move on? If you feel like it's not working, you haven't wasted your time in no contact. And here's an ironic part about it. If you understand what I'm trying to say here, and hopefully I'm saying it well enough to understand, that if you're not sure if you should stay in no contact or if you should just move on, Moving on is like a higher version. It's like a stronger version of no contact. The funny thing is, I've talked to a lot of clients that once they made that mental and emotional decision to quote unquote move on, that's when they really start projecting the strength that draws the other person back. Keep in mind, your intent and your answer to the question, should I stay in no contact or should I move on, doesn't actually lessen or hurt your chances of winning them back. That's an internal question. That's something that if you've been doing no contact, they won't know that you just shifted. Except sometimes they do know, because when you do that little shift, even though you've decided that you're just moving forward without them, by virtue of doing that, you'll send these subtle signals that you really are moving on. Like maybe you start dating somebody. Maybe you take a job in a location that you weren't going to take. Maybe you stop talking to their friends. Maybe you stop going to those locations that you were hoping to run into them. All these little subtle things that you were doing that you thought were so effective in no contact, a lot of times those were actually kind of hindering you. And it's the mental strength of you accepting that maybe they're not coming back and now you're moving forward. Well, that strength is real. So sometimes when you do the I'm moving on and I'm no longer in no contact to win them back, think of that as a more pure version of no contact, because sometimes that's the key to the strength to win them back. So it can all become this convoluted, conflicting thought in your mind. Just look at it like this. If I'm doing no contact the right way, it's the best way to get over them. It's the best way to move on. And it's the best way to win them back. So I hope this makes sense. I know no contact can be really painful, and I know every situation is different. If I can help, please let me know. You can find me at realcoachken.com. Please give me a like, share, and subscribe if this has been any help at all, and I'll be back to you soon. Thanks a lot.